I mean, it is a word that we use a lot. Just the name, just the name, theosophy, is, talks about, Sophia is wisdom. So it talks about the wisdom like the wisdom of the gods. So divine wisdom. So like Raz says, it's a term that we use an awful lot and assume that we all mean the same thing with it. And very often it seems that when we think in terms of someone who is wise, very often we make a mistake. That someone who is very knowledgeable, or maybe even someone who has lived a long time, is necessarily wise. And I think that's, while sometimes that is the case, that's not necessarily correct, obviously. My daughter, not too long ago, she's a very generous sort of person, and she had gone into Chicago. We live in the suburbs now. She had gone into Chicago, and there was an older man who was, begging. And so she always wants to give something. So she was, he asked for some, he had his hand out, and so she gave him some money. But then he was a person, he wasn't satisfied with that. So she's getting on to the train, and they have, you have cards to go onto the subway or the bus. So he's saying, look, give me your card, give me your card. And she said she had a conflict because she said, Dad, this is an older man who was asking me for, wanted to take this card, but I had to get home. And, she said, I felt kind of bad telling him no, because here's an older person, said, he's an older person, so he's wise. I said, whoa, hold on. I said to her, you don't want to mistake age with wisdom. You give respect, certainly. But every person that is gray is not wise. The fact is that some of the most foolish people I have known, they say there is no fool like an old fool. No fool like an old fool. You get somebody who has lived a life, has had every opportunity and experience to kind of expand and to grow, but has for some reason insisted on not learning. That's not a wise person. But you give that person the respect that you give to, because they're a human being. But don't make the mistake of thinking that's wise. So what is wisdom? In Buddhist tradition, particularly in Mahayana Buddhism, the type of Buddhism that the Dalai Lama is involved in, traditionally there are two paths that join together. The one is the path of love and compassion. The other is the path of wisdom. And you can approach it along any one of these, but the idea is that ultimately these two have to come together. And in Buddhism, wisdom and what they would call emptiness are synonyms. They mean the same thing, which is kind of interesting. How is it that we get to the point that you can say wisdom and emptiness are the same? And I think in part you can say, when we talked the other day about this idea of false identity, and the idea that I'm an American, that I'm a male, that I'm a Christian, whatever, all the identities that we give to ourselves, gave the example of, in Eastern practice, there's this idea of neti, which is to say, not this, not this. So as a meditative approach, you ask yourself, am I American, or am I president of the Theosophical Society? And when you look at it, essentially, no. This is just the latest label, the latest identity we have adopted. So it's not this. So much like peeling an onion. It's not this, it's not this, it's not this. But the idea is, certainly if you peel an onion long enough, you get to the point where there's nothing left to peel. You pull one more layer off, and what's left? And so this is where, what's left is everything. There's an openness, there is space, is what remains. And in a sense, space is all-embracing. It's the one thing that when we think of everything that comes into being, everything that exists, in your mind you can visualize a time when trees, or a place where trees don't exist, houses don't exist, people don't exist, planets don't exist, galaxies don't exist. But there is no way to even imagine something where space does not exist. Everything moves, lives, has its being within what most people think of as emptiness. And so in a sense, the wisdom that we speak about is a wisdom that is all-encompassing, but not related to any one thing. So there's a famous Perfection of Wisdom Sutra called the Prajna Paramita Sutra. The paramitas are the perfections. So the perfection of Prajna Sutra of the Buddha. So it's the perfection of wisdom. And if you ever hear it said, you want to know what is wisdom. The only way that it's expressed is in what wisdom is not. So you'll have the setting for this particular sutra is that one of the Buddha's disciples was sitting, and he had the experience of enlightenment or wisdom. And so he was asked to transmit this to one of the other disciples, Shariputra. So he went on to talk to Shariputra about the nature of wisdom, the nature of prajna. And so in it he says, And he talks about this is the Shariputra, this is the original character of everything. It is not born, it's not annihilated, it's not tainted, it's not pure. It doesn't increase, it doesn't decrease. This is how he describes it. And then he goes on to say that in wisdom, there is no eye, no ear, no nose, no tongue, no body, no mind. So the 6 senses of Buddhism, which are basically the 5 senses, they're the 5 organs of perception. The tongue we taste with, the eye we see with, the hand we feel with. That it's none of that. And it's beyond ignorance. In wisdom, there is no death. There is no dying. In wisdom, there is no ignorance, and there is also no ending of ignorance. So it's, by the time you get done hearing this Prajna Paramitra Sutra, it's like, all I asked was, what is wisdom? Come on. But we think that we can put our finger on something. That if we can describe it, if we can explain it, we know it. And the whole effort for anyone who is really intent on the experience of wisdom is not limitation through our concepts, but completely trying to move outside of. When we are wise, the people who are wise display it in ways of Krishna. In Bhagavad Gita says, we were talking about prayer, but by whatever way men approach me, people approach me, by whatever path they approach me, on that same path do I meet them. That's a sign of wisdom, that somebody is approaching the divine through prayers that are basically begging for something. Lord, give me a new car. By that same path, does the divine meet you? I mean, maybe the car appears. Prayer is answered. Hallelujah. But then, the prayer is answered, and at the same time, it's found that it is completely unsatisfying. So along that path, you're met to find that there's something that lies beyond that. So by whatever path we travel, on that same path, we're met. And this is the nature of wisdom, that there is nothing within it that is out of place. I can remember years ago, Mount St. Helens out in Washington State blew up. I forget when that was, but probably in the 80s or something like that. And it was a terrible blow up. I remember seeing it on TV because all of the cameras and everybody was gathered there because they knew this volcano was getting ready to blow. They evacuated the area. Supposedly there was only one person. He said, I'm not leaving. Of course, they never found him. But, the mountain blew up. And you have these wonderful photographs of this explosion where basically the entire, I think it was, east side of the mountain exploded outward. And so you have this time-lapse photography where you have smoke, then you have the first eruption, and the whole side of the mountain is starting to come out. And it blows and blows, and huge devastation that took place. And I can remember I was flying out to Seattle, and the pilot took us over Mount St. Helens. And this was probably, this was within a year of the time that it had blown up. And I had never seen anything like it. I looked out the window of the plane, and as you're flying, first of all, the thing that strikes you is that every single tree was just laid down on the ground. Everything's going in the exact same direction. It was like little matchsticks that a child had arranged. Just flattened trees for miles. Everything was completely gray, covered in dust. There wasn't a living thing there. And I said, this is amazing. It looked like something on the moon, lifeless. And it was amazing to just think about the power of that thing. About 10 years later, I was flying back to Seattle, and flew over Mount St. Helens again. And still you could see where these trees were laid down, but now it was something that was completely green, alive. Animals were living in this place, and they had come back into the area. It was a thriving, alive place where at once it was completely dead and blackened. And so on the one hand, I'm thinking, oh, the destruction and the loss of life, oh, it's horrible. And then on the other hand, I come back and the presence of life and the newness of it and the growth is wonderful. So, on the one hand, we tend to think, oh, destruction is a terrible thing. Actually, in the Bhagavad Gita, there's a wonderful passage. Actually, it's one of my favorites. Because it's the point where, and for those of you who are not familiar with the Gita, it's the spiritual book that was the foundation of Mahatma Gandhi's work, for one thing. This is the thing he was the basis of his spirituality. But it's a wonderful book because it's something that is pointed at all of us.
And I believe it's written in Vietnamese.
Oh,
I think it's written in every language on the planet.
Yeah. The Gita is in every language, for sure. But for those who aren't familiar with it, the setting for the story is fascinating to begin with. Because it's a conversation that takes place. There's a war that is getting ready to begin. And it's just about to start. And the war is very interesting because it's between two families. But the families, have been close throughout their histories. So on each side of the line are people who are uncles, cousins, friends, teachers, masters who have been involved with both sides. So on the one side it begins right before this battle's getting ready to start. Arjuna, who is one of the ones who's going to be fighting, wants to go up onto a high place so he can look over the battlefield. So he calls his charioteer, the person who's basically driving his car, driving his chariot. And the charioteer is Krishna. And so Arjuna doesn't fully realize it yet. I mean, he knows Krishna's a special person. But he doesn't realize fully that this is actually the incarnation of God, of the divine, that's driving his chariot. So he tells Krishna, take me up onto that high hill. I need to look over the battlefield. And so when he gets there, he looks on each side and he sees all of the forces ready. Everybody has their arrows, they have their swords, they have their spears ready for this fight to begin. And they're blowing the horns, getting ready to call everyone to battle. And so what happens to Arjuna is this. He's a warrior. In India they have that caste system, and he was a Kshatriya, which is to say he's a warrior of the warrior caste. And that's his duty, that's his life. But he gets up here at this moment before the battle, and when he looks at everything, he says, I can't do this. I'm looking out over all of this, and I see friends, I see people who have taught me, people who have cradled me on the other side, And for me to go into this battle and to win would mean that I'm taking their lives. I can't do it. And so that, that first part of the Bhagavad Gita is called the despondency of Arjuna, where he just loses hope and he says, I can't do any of this. And that's when this is when he starts to find out who Krishna is. And he starts talking to him. He talks him through all of this. But the part in it that I'm talking about that really is one of my favorites. At a certain point, as this conversation goes along, Arjuna becomes fully aware that he's in the presence of an incarnation of the divine. And so at one point he asks Krishna, he says, look, please, I know that you are divine, and I'm looking at you now in your form as a charioteer. What I'm asking you is this: show me, let me see you in your true form, your divine form. Please show this to me. And so Krishna obliges. He says, okay, you asked for it, here it is. And so the mask drops, and what Arjuna sees, well, really he can't handle. Because what he sees is, the way it's described is he sees first of all of these different people that are out here ready to fight, just flowing into the Krishna's mouth and their fangs, and everybody is dying, all of them. And then with Krishna, things are being born continually. Everything is being destroyed continually. And he gets a glimpse of this, and Arjuna says, okay, enough. Close it down. I can't take it. And so in a sense, what he was provided with was probably the view that anyone who has the experience that we call wisdom achieves. I think very often we would like to think that it would be wonderful if we could experience the heights of vision that someone like a Jesus did, or to be able to see things the way the masters of the wisdom see it, or the Buddha. And we imagine that as being just the ultimate in bliss. And probably that's 50% true. But the other 50% is that the experience of anyone who is truly wise is to truly see. Not just see happiness and joy, but to see that it all is part of one process. As much as we like living here now, we come back to this place 80 years from now. If someone comes back here 80 years from now, not a one of us, 80, let's say 90, because you guys look pretty healthy and young. 90 years from now, not a one of us will be here. But someone will be. It's the nature of the process that all of these things go on at any given time. And it's the nature of wisdom that it embraces all of this. And so to say, what is wisdom? I think that they're really right with that Prajnaparamita Sutra. It's much easier and probably much more correct to say what it is not. And that's a long way of saying it's easier.
It's not enlightenment.
Well,
It is and is not.
yeah, enlightenment requires the experience of wisdom. So anybody that we can look at and say was an enlightened being is necessarily wise, because the two are really the one is the other.
And like you said at the beginning, so many times we fall prey to those that we believe are wise,
Yeah,
only to find
yeah,
that they're not.
yeah,
And then that puts a big dent in a lot of people's belief in the potentiality of meeting a true wise person.
yeah, that's right. Yeah. It's very often the case that our trust gets damaged along the way. I mean, a lot of people, as children, we have the experience of something occurring where someone or something that we find ourselves looking up to lets us down. And very often it becomes hard for people to trust others in those situations. And very often people will carry that through a lifetime. And so when you start talking about things like, what you're studying here with the Vietnamese group, which is faith and was it self-confidence? Self-confidence. You look to a little book like At the Feet of the Master, where those terms are used, self-confidence. And you ask yourself, what does that mean? And why would faith and self-confidence be linked together? And probably in a normal sense, when we talk about self-confidence, it's being able to walk into a room and feel as if we feel kind of secure and whole in being there, like we belong, that we fit. And that's a normal kind of idea of what self-confidence is. And that's a healthy personality trait. It's something we have to have. We have to cultivate something like that. But when you talk about self-confidence in another level, that particular self that walks into the room and is able to speak or is able to be liked or, shake hands and smile, I always feel as if it's good to kind of go back to causes, and then we can work our way out to symptoms. But that self that we place so much attention on is a very temporary thing and very limited. I mean, all you have to do is keep living. And like me, I had it in my mind that probably I would just be able to pass through this life. And as I said, I would be going to visit people in the hospital, but it wouldn't be me. Not that I really thought that, but I had no indication as to why it would be. Until I hurt my shoulder, and about 3-4 weeks ago, I have to go in and have it operated on. You all haven't seen it, but when I get out to the car with Tom, I'm going to put my sling back on. But I thought I would wear my sling in here just in case, just in case my talk is a little weak. I can at least get sympathy. I put the sling on and I start to see that I'm not making sense. You could say, oh, it's his shoulder. But I figured I'd work without a net. But, you go into the hospital and you start to find that, yes, it's just a body. And as such, it has certain vulnerabilities. And there is no body that lasts forever. The Bionic Man was somebody on TV. And even his TV show got canceled. So where is he now? So you start to develop this kind of idea that it's an advantage, really, when you, if ever you find yourself drawn to something deeper. Some of the things that some of these great people have said become more meaningful. One of the things you find being repeated, again, you can look to the Bible, you can look wherever, but St. Paul, he said that I die daily. Every day I die. And a lot of the stuff you probably would do well to think about. Because obviously it wasn't like he was actually dying every day. In a certain sense, when we go to sleep and wake up, it mimics death. You know, that when we go to sleep, when we're in deep sleep, there's a certain sort of partial separation that takes place between the body and the other vehicles of consciousness. But there is still a thread of connection. So when we sleep, it approximates death. And they actually would say, you know, there are these various states of consciousness which are spoken of as waking, dreaming, deep sleep, and then the fourth category is something that they just call the fourth. You know, in Sanskrit they say Jagrat, Svapna, Susupti, and then Turiya, which Turiya just means the fourth, because it's no point trying to put a name on it, it's beyond all of that. But in waking consciousness, we understand that. When we sleep, there is this state of dreaming that normally takes place. And in dreaming, we often find ourselves connected with the surrounding atmosphere of emotions, of thoughts. And sometimes dreams are even able to foresee something in the future. Deep sleep is that state where there is no awareness, there is no further connection between the consciousness and the body, the consciousness and the brain. So that's a state that in which there is a certain sort of freedom that occurs. But it's a freedom that we have no capacity to appreciate because it never really filters into our consciousness. For the ones who are spoken of as perhaps enlightened or advanced beings, there is this sort of fourth state where there is this expanded awareness in which there's actually the capacity to bring it back to the bodies that they have, that they deal with. No. We're not going to be cruel like that. Make somebody sing. How dare you? Yeah, we can do karaoke. Yeah. She doesn't want to sing. But, so there's that possibility from sleep and wakenness. But when we talk about dying daily, that's one way you could look at it. But just in terms of the idea of developing a habit, the famous, quite famous, really a saint and a wise man, Ramana Maharshi, as a very young person, the thing that kind of sparked his awakening, he found himself at home as a very young man. And he was at home alone, apparently, and he had this feeling that somehow he was about to die. And at first it awakened kind of a sense of fear in him. But then, being who he was, he took the approach of, wait a minute, rather than try and wall myself off from this, let me just experience what it means to die. And so he lay down on the floor, and he just, the way it's described, he just gave himself over to this experience. So in every way that he could imagine, he allowed himself to die. The body ceased to move. He observed the movement of the consciousness as it flowed through, as it kind of gathered itself in the heart and then left from the body. So he had this experience of a death, which after that is when he actually engaged in, he went on from there and became the enlightened being that he was. But to die daily, they say to the person who dies before they die, when they die, they don't die. Say that 5 times fast.
Say it one more time. Just one more time.
To the person that dies before they die, so I'll repeat it again. The person who dies before they die, so before the actual experience of what we call death and being put into the ground occurs, the person who's able to experience dying before that happens. So to the one who dies before they die, when they die, when the body actually does pass, they do not die. It's a little weird, but
So why does he think they don't die after they die?
well, because at that point, the idea that we tend to have and the thing that we tend to fear is some sense of finality, that something ends with the ending of the body.
And he was Hindu, so he was going to reincarnation anyway, right?
Well, but Hindu or even materialistic scientist, everybody knows there is something which continues to exist, even if you just call it energy. So, but the difference is the experience of that. People here, has anyone ever had like a near-death experience in the room?
I have.
Yeah, many people. They say,
Do you want to hear?
I do. I definitely do.
It's happened for a long time. I got an asthma,
Mhm.
and my husband gave me some medicine to reduce it. But after 10 minutes, I still cannot breathe.
Mhm.
And my husband in the worry, he gave me some more, and I got over there,
Mhm.
and I feel all the body feel cold.
Mhm.
And that's it. I don't know anything about that. But I remember I overboard on the bed,
Mhm.
and I see my body,
Mhm.
and my husband, he do everything in my body, and he call me, go back, and my child, they cry a lot. And suddenly I wake up. I alive again, and after that I told my husband, I see my body, and you do something, and my child do something, and my husband very surprised. But that's happened.
Mhm.
Everything exactly the same. And that I think I really died one
Yeah.
time already.
Yeah.
I see my child cry, and in my mind, I really sad because my children too small.
Yep.
And I think about if I die, who take care of them? And I see my husband and really love him that time, because in that time he take care of me too much, and he almost cried.
Mhm.
Yes.
Mhm. Mhm.
And you said, if I die one time, and when I die, I don't die.
Yeah. So can I ask you, after that experience,
Yes.
how did you feel about living and about dying?
After that experience, and I think that if I have still living more, I need to love everybody and love more and take care of my husband. And if something my husband do I don't feel good, I forgive him, and I still love.
Mhm.
And I see the life too short.
Mhm.
We love more and don't lose the time. Yeah. Because I don't know when I die.
Yeah.
And if I'm still to live, I love my family, love my kids,
what about dying? Is that something that, do you have a fear about actually, because at some point it happens. Is that something that you have a fear about, or is it something that, did your view of that change at all?
The fear?
Do you, about dying?
You feel like oh no before I'm really scared to die.
Yes.
But when I begin to be a
Theosophy?
yes,
Yes, yes.
I know more because I understand. Because if I die, I go to another life.
Mhm.
Yeah. This life only the school for I try to study some more.
Mhm.
And now I never die. I never scared.
Mhm.
Yes.
So
And
it's true.
I'm ready for that. If I tell my husband, if I die before you, let some people help you to take care for you every day. I don't be here anymore.
Yeah. So I think you're kind of proof of, if you die before you die, you don't die when you die. Yeah, and that, what you're talking about. I know many people who have had this near death, different degrees of this near death, and it seems as if almost always this kind of mind is what they come back with, that life is short, and what is important. And what is important is really to love,
Yes,
to learn how to love and to love.
yes,
Yeah,
that's correct.
yeah. Well, thank you. We knew you were special already. You don't fool anybody. Anybody who was raised Catholic was probably said a great number of Hail Marys. And the way that prayer ends always, like with many prayers from other traditions, is it's a prayer to Mother Mary. Hail Mary, full of grace, blessed art thou among women, blessed is the fruit of thy womb. I'm not even Catholic, and I know it. But it ends with, be with me now and at the moment of death. It's a prayer for the divine in the form of Mother Mary to be with me during the course of my life, but most particularly at the moment of passing. And that's something that comes up throughout spiritual traditions. I'd said something about prayer to begin with when we were ending there, and maybe I should just come back to it at least briefly. I think for many people, the image that is called up and the image that has been taught to many people of who it is that we pray to or what it is that we pray to, most often people think in terms of praying to God in the Western world. And very often there is an image of someone who looks a lot like us. That there is a great man in the sky. You see the old paintings of God, and it's always an old man in the sky with a long white beard. There are white clouds, and any of the paintings that I've ever seen is also a white man. Always. I don't see the Vietnamese God in these paintings. I don't see the African American God. It's always the same guy with this white beard.
Kind of looking like Santa Claus, except more serious.
Very serious fellow. Very serious fellow. And so for many people, the idea is, I'm going to ask him for something to help me. And so it's in a way, to a certain extent, it's like a glorification of a begging. And so for many people, that particular idea of prayer, even though it's something like Krishna says, by whatever path we come, by that path we are met, probably there's a deeper and more expanded meaning to prayer. And again, it ties in with this whole idea of wisdom. What is it that we are praying to or praying for? And, what I would say is that true prayer, it doesn't require words. Words are very helpful to focus our mind and to focus our intent. But true prayer requires no words. That really, when we are praying at our deepest, what we are doing is, it's a recognition that in this moment of prayer, I recognize the divine. Very often, we build this recognition through, some people build a recognition through recognizing the many ways that they are blessed. So, I recognize in this moment the blessings of health, of family, of a heart that can love. I recognize most deeply my deepest aspiration, which is somehow to know you, to know the divine and experience the divine more deeply. And we put those things into words. And as I say, the words tend to focus it. And so when we're in our moments of prayer, those are the times that really we find ourselves lifting ourselves up by turning our eyes, turning our hearts into a more open space. And that's what prayer would be. And to many people, it seems like it's something strange or difficult, or they really don't feel like I want to get into this thing because of the religious connotations. But I have said, much like what Fali is saying, that this whole activity of spiritual unfoldment specifically through prayer, is very much like something we all know how to do. It's very, very familiar to all of us, because it is, in fact, exactly like something we have done throughout our lives, which is the simple act of making a friend. And I'm not talking about, making a friend of some, higher being. You ask yourself this: what is it that has gone into, anytime we've had a friend, what is it that happens for us to become friends? And when you think about it, pretty much what happens is, whether you're in grade school or whether you're a grown person, you find yourself in the presence of someone, or you see someone, and there's something about that person that you appreciate. So it begins with appreciation. And that appreciation is somehow attractive to us. And so when you see this person, you find yourself wanting to know more about them. There's something about them that seems to call you. So you want to know more about them. You want to perhaps be in their presence. So then what do? I mean, if you just appreciate and just let it drop, you all may never meet. So, what we tend to do is, you meet someone, let's go have coffee, or come over to my place for lunch, or whatever, let's go for a walk. Whatever it is you do, basically what's happening is this: you are creating the opportunity to spend time in this person's presence. That's what we do as kids. I like you, we're going to go out and play. We're going to throw the ball, we're going to talk, we're going to do things. But really what you're doing, you spend time in someone's presence. And it's kind of a magical thing that happens. Because as we spend time with someone, it invariably happens that we get to know them more deeply and know them in deeper ways. So much so that when we're around our friend, it gets to the point that if your friend is thinking something, you can say it before they even say it. That always happens. I can just look at my friend and know that he's not feeling good right now. Or look at him and know that he's happy. And no words have even been said. But it's this process we spend time in the presence of. If we find that the qualities of that friend are such that it moves to a deeper place inside of us, to some place where we can say, this friend really is someone that I love, then the experience is magnified. Anybody who has ever been in love in any sort of way, it's a common experience where, the one that you love is in another city and you're away for a while, and suddenly for some reason you find yourself feeling very happy or very sad, at 12:05 in the afternoon. And nothing's happening to make me feel happy. Nothing's happening outwardly to make me feel sad. But then you talk on the phone in the evening to your loved one. And they tell you, I had such a bad day. At 12 o'clock this afternoon, something happened, and I felt so sad. Time, space, the separation mean nothing. You feel it. You experience it just like the beloved experiences it. And that's something that's not foreign to any of us. We all have been through all of this. And so when I talk about all of these sort of spiritual things, I always say it's a mistake to think that there is some separation between living a normal life or living a life and that which is spiritual. You divide those, you're going to have problems all of your life because you're going to be bouncing between one and another. Unless I'm sitting on a cushion meditating or at a theosophical meeting, I'm not really fulfilled spiritually. I'm out here working on the job. I'm separated from spirituality. It's wrong. It's a mistake. So when we talk about a spiritual practice, and when we talk about prayer specifically, the idea that we are making a friend, not with a person. I go into my room, I sit down, I recognize the presence that is all around me all the time, that is within me at every moment, and I sit in the presence of my friend. And the deeper my prayer means the more deeply I recognize that this is omnipresent, it's all present, all knowing, all loving, all accepting, it's all. Sometimes that becomes focused in an individual. So many people, the example of that is the Christ, the Buddha, the masters of the wisdom. So their face, their presence is sort of the doorway that opens to this experience of the divine. But it's a common process. It's a simple process. This stuff does not have to be so complicated.
It sounds like you're describing namaskar. Namaskar, when you're rather yourself up into your solitude and praying for something deeper within yourself to be more open to the presence of the divine energy that's in the beings around you, that and knowing that they are divine, that they're the ones, that everyone that you're around are the ones that are going to lift you up and bring you into that heightened level of compassion and maybe wisdom. Depending on how you use it. But you know, the term namaskar, namaste, I see the divine in you. When I see the divine in you, I recognize that you and myself are one.
Yeah. I think it gets down to the point where it's, it's not two, it's one. So whatever it is that makes that process possible is what we do. I'd like to share with you perhaps, just have a few more minutes. And since we've been talking about prayer, there is a prayer that I find myself over the years quite drawn to. And one that, I find myself fathoming its meaning more deeply perhaps as time goes on. It's a beautiful prayer. It comes from the Christian tradition. But the place I first encountered it was in the introduction. There's a book called The Cloud of Unknowing. Yeah, it's a beautiful book. It's really sort of a handbook on mysticism. But it was written by, they don't even know who wrote it, but a 14th century Christian monk. But there's a prayer that is used to introduce the book. And, I'll just share this prayer with you. And keeping in mind it comes from the Christian tradition, so of course, God. So the way the prayer goes is, O God, unto whom all hearts lie open, unto whom desire is eloquent, from whom no secret thing is hidden. Purify the thoughts of my heart with the outpouring of your Spirit, that I may love you with a perfect love and praise you as you deserve. It's a very powerful prayer. And when you think about it, the first part of that prayer is simply an open recognition. What is the divine? The divine is that to which every heart lies like an open book. There's nothing within us. It's a comforting idea that there is nothing within us that lies hidden. None of the little secret things, none of the little bad things that we think are about ourselves are hidden in any way. And that the deepest sort of aspirations, our prayers to know God more deeply, to love more deeply, that desire speaks out. Yeah, unto whom desire is eloquent. So that's the first part of the prayer, and then the last part is really a request. Yeah. Purify the thoughts of my heart. As we think in our hearts, so are we. Purify those thoughts, that I may love you with a perfect love and praise you as you deserve. And so what is the praise that is deserving to the divine? Is it, oh, you're the greatest thing, you look good, you wear nice clothes? None of that. The praise that is deserved is, again, the recognition of the presence of that which is divine on anything that you lay your eyes. The inner ruler immortal that is present in the hearts of every being is the divine. To praise the divine is to recognize and to see it. And to the extent that we do that, it has that effect of unfolding some of these powers that are inside of us, connecting us more deeply with one another, and inviting, really, something that is vital, particularly right now. We invite the presence of those great ones who perhaps can shine some little light into our minds in this really darkened time that we find ourselves in. Oftentimes, there's a work that is needed to be done. Oftentimes we think of it as the work I have to do on myself, which is correct. We all have to work on ourselves. But ultimately, that work is so that something greater will have an opportunity to make itself known in this world. The times we sit down here together, it's wonderful to have a meeting like this for what it brings to each one of us. But beyond that, to be able to create a moment into which, by the work that we've done of recognizing, of thinking, of trying to be open, we invite a greater presence. These sorts of things become useful. That's why getting together and meeting is so important, because those moments can be used for a higher purpose. And that's felt in the world, as little as we may know it. So I am very thankful to have been able to share this moment together with you all. And I think we've done some pretty good things in our time together. Houston is the better for us. So thank you.
Cảm tạ ân huệ của Đức Sư Phụ đã cho chúng con có được buổi học tập hôm nay. Cầu xin cho ở khắp mọi nơi, mọi người đều thương yêu lẫn nhau, cùng nhau hợp tác chặt chẽ thành một khối để phụng sự cho nhân loại được tiến bộ về trí thức và tâm linh. Cầu xin cho thiên cơ mau chóng thành tựu.
Thank you, Masters, for all your blessings to this study group today. We pray that people around the world will love one another and work closely together to serve mankind, so that we all can improve in mind and in spirit. May your plan be accomplished with God's speed.
Want to thank you everyone for coming out today and sharing this wonderful day experience with us. I want to thank all our members of our group who was involved in organizing this day today. Thanking people for carpooling, Tom and Sylvester, people who were involved in bringing the food, John and fruits and all, Ling and some other people. A lot of people can bring it. Then thank our photographers, Tony.
Tony, yeah, very important.
And I finally want to thank the team for making this visit to our group today. We're very honored and humbled at this experience. Our group, small group, and it's been only founded for less than 2 years, so we are grateful that you took out your time out of your busy day and come and have this wonderful experience with us. We are very grateful.
everybody, if you want to stay and have good time with us, team not leaving until 4 or 4:30, so have fun.